And here we are. We are blasting off into the future on this week's Future Forward. Steve
Yes,
Rosenbaum
sir.
here with Gene DeRose to talk about
Hey, Steve.
things present, future, and far future. But
Yeah, we'll see.
maybe not so far. Um,
Yeah.
let's jump right in because we've got a packed show, and
Yep.
and I want to just start with the SpaceX heavy rocket liftoff. Why was it so unbelievably awesome, Gene?
I think there's a few things going on here, and I think part of it has to do with a little Elon Musk magic, not just his personality, but he's staged the public awareness of this in a way that the U.S. government probably used to do, or was just lucky because of the original 60s, 70s space age to get the benefit of all that wonder. But, when I looked at it, I saw sort of three things really fast. One is recapturing that inspiration, and a lot of it had to do with the ability to live stream and then see the repeats. I mean, it was all fine and good, but the moment when the two booster rockets simultaneously were able to land upright, I got chills. That was magical. And, my son and I and my family, we watched it again and again. So one's inspiration. The second is that they're bringing, my phrase is start up everything. They're bringing the spirit, the progressiveness, and the kind of, technology acumen and methodology to a business that isn't an internet business. And then the third is just that we're on the frontiers. And it's exciting because it's just edgy stuff.
All right, so let me ask the cynical question, just to play devil's advocate. Was putting the Tesla car in the rocket with the spaceman and the camera, did it cross the line into unnecessary theatrics, or was it just charming and funny?
Yeah, it was. It's right at the razor's edge.
I agree.
Understand how some people could feel it was a little shark jumpy, and just a little bit silly and narcissistic. But on the other hand, it was kind of cute and cool and funny. And I don't know if you noticed, but yesterday, they uploaded a picture of the Earth in the background with the spaceman and the thing. And to me, the fact that Bowie's Space Oddity is playing in the car makes it that much better.
Yeah. Now, okay. So I gotta say, lots of launches, whatever. I'm paying attention. And then when it gets to the part where the two boosters land in perfect unison back on the pad, I was like, okay, that's beyond showmanship. That's serious. I mean, those are that was. I'd like to have been in the meeting where they said, "What about if we land them so that they land in unison?" And Musk is like, "How much extra effort is that?" And a whole bunch of engineers just shake their head and go, "Ugh."
Right. Holy cow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It was look, you could criticize so much about it, but imagination needs to be captured for these things, and I feel good because it's the kind of thing that would help. I think will help a languishing NASA focus on some.
He spoke last year at the TED conference, not about either Tesla or about SpaceX, but about the Boring Company. And
the energy one.
What? No, this is the underground tunneling company that he's.
Oh yeah, sure.
Which I had heard nothing about, and frankly thought was a little bit almost like a parlor trick when he mentioned it. But he was quite serious and came off surprisingly modest and kind of serious about his work, but not. There was no chest pounding. There was no performance. It was impressive.
I mean, look, the guy doing things and making things really happen. I mean, I don't know whether he's going to get enough credit, but what's going on with Tesla, it isn't just that the time has come, because I had a 45 miles per hour car in the late 70s. It's that he broke through a dogged refusal to let the future happen on the part of the powers that be. And so, he deserves every bit. He's not pounding his chest. He's serious when he brings these things up, and it's showing.
So let's talk about what does it mean? It feels like something changed in the space business, in space tech. Um, you know, Lockheed, there's a headline in Mercury News saying Lockheed Martin is going to work with startups to send their tech into space. You know, have we really crossed some magical line into space exploration that's now like we've brought in private sector, we've got revenues. It's like it seems like it's reinvigorated.
Well, I think we're going to see that it's reinvigorated. It reminds me of the difference between like, .com one was like NASA, where it was a lot of splashy stuff, but substantively not a ton was happening. And then in the last 20 years, even though there's still plenty of sexy stuff, it's literally reinventing and taking over huge sectors of the economy. I think in an unsexy way, you're going to start to see dozens and dozens of things go to the next level beyond mere satellite capabilities. I'm not positive about the ability to deliver the sexiness in an ongoing basis. Colonizing or putting a base on the moon, that'll be a big deal. I'm not sure beyond that. So we'll see. But I believe in it. I mean, I believe that there's too many benefits to what will happen. I mean, some of this swings all the way back to one of the key business opportunities is the degrees to which we can monitor the Earth and its activities in so many ways. And so some of it becomes somewhat about privacy and personal information and a lot of scary stuff.
So, without giving away the story behind J.J. Abrams' new space show that's on Netflix, I'll only say we should be really careful about how we mess around with the space-time continuum thing.
You mean like in the other dimensional sense, or yeah? Well, I don't know.
I'm just saying. I'm good with the moon, but once we start doing that go to Mars thing, the sci-fi stuff kicks in for me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's a lot of great movies, TV shows, books about some of that stuff. I think the show Fringe was great from many years ago that people should watch.
All right, so before we move on from space, like what? I guess maybe I lost track of the whole International Space Station thing where we and the Russians were sharing and it was being like is this also somehow us bringing it back into the U.S.? Does I'd love to know what kind of a bill Tesla or SpaceX sends to the federal government. $1 billion sign here, they just wire it over.
Yeah, well, it's probably something like. Well, I think it's going to be very nuts and bolts too in terms of payloads and things like that. But whether there's some. We weren't in the room where it happened. Issues around what it takes to get to use the Cape Kennedy launch pads and all that other stuff. Who knows? But I do feel like they'll probably be very egalitarian in who they do their business with, and it just happens to be a lot of that stuff in the U.S. But it remains to be seen whether China will really, really swing a big stick at this stuff or not.
All right, so let's get to our loving and hating. Gene, you've been out both deeply loving and deeply hating this week. So tell us what you found.
I'm always loving and hating. I know. Well, this week, what I'd like to talk about is something that I've been loving, and it's an app called Lively. It's on iOS. I'm not sure if it's on Android or not, and it's from a tiny Singapore company that's really a couple of developers. And Lively does magical yet very obvious and straightforward things with the live photo feature that we all have noticed for a couple years on our iPhones that makes when you're going from photo to photo, there be a little movement. And, nothing much has been communicated about that. And only those that look under the covers a little know that that's actually like 18 photos that have been put together and that's being tracked. But what the Lively app does that's really cool is you open it up and it can do three things. One, it can actually create a little GIF out of that little movement, which is more significant than you realize. Two, it can create a short little video of it, difference between a looping GIF and an actual video. 3, my favorite part, is it lets you go into a frame by frame look at the pictures, because sometimes crazy things happen, and I don't know how Apple's iOS photo thing decides what the good photo is to use as the main still, but weird things happen when you're doing that, and sometimes they involve sound too. So it's a great app, and it's a really neat thing. Google, for what it's worth, came out with an app called Motion Stills a year ago, and I haven't looked at that yet. It's supposed to be some of the similar things, but I just don't understand where the live photo capability showed up without telling us what the point of it was, other than there's a little whimsical movement when you look at your photo archives.
Well, I can tell you what the live photos have done for me. I have been begrudgingly stuck with Aperture as my photo, which
I tried,
which I love, even though it's way dead, and no one's supporting it, and it hates live photos.
Oh, that's funny. So that's Apple conflict within itself.
Well, because they basically abandoned Aperture and moved to Photos, iPhoto, whatever that was, 3 years ago now. And so when I try, and the thing about those live photos is they're huge.
Yeah, they are huge. They are huge, and they take a lot of memory. And it's a thing that you don't even realize unless you're really paying attention, that you can turn it on and off at different times.
Really?
It's got a little yellow glow at the top of it. Yeah, you don't have to have your photos all be. Yeah, pretty sure.
All right.
I could be wrong.
All right, so we're gonna.
So that's a big deal.
Split decision on loving and hating. You're loving Lively, and I'm hating live photos, but not for any reason.
But you might be intrigued if you started using Lively or took a look at what it could do to you, because one of the things it does is it lets you offload a still image, right? Then you can go use that with your Aperture.
All right.
So under hating it, it's a little bit of a big generic sweeping one, and it is broadcast television. In the era of unplugging, time shifting, and the uncertainty of what it is we're paying and to whom. And my case in point is really simple, because I don't really mind all this disruption if it's moving things in a direction that have been stuck for a long time. But what sucks is when I kind of discover a show, in this case NBC's The Good Place, which some people might hate, but I think is a really cute, neat show. And it turns out my wife and I love it. Our kids at different ages love it. It's really neat. But NBC is forcing you to pay for it per episode in a spotty way. If you just straightforwardly just go into your on-demand off of at least Verizon, and then so we looked at that, and then we said, all right, let's go check it out on Amazon. Let's go check it out in other places. It's either not available, one season versus another available, or you've got to pay for it. And in my opinion, the one thing broadcast cable, the main network, should not be doing is playing around with their formula before they know what the hell they're doing with it. So for a show that is historically something we think of as being free, to suddenly have these little gateways, that people aren't going to watch these shows and they're going to drop them.
Okay, so not speaking for myself, but for a friend who I happen to know who does such things, one could torrent it. A friend would tell me.
Yeah, I have not. That friend of mine. But what's funny about the torrenting is, and this is where I'm thinking about this more than anything, is your typical viewer isn't. I talk to people all the time. They don't even realize that the little wavy thing on your iOS means you can show something off of your iPhone up on your Samsung TV. Like, people are not, they don't have a clue how to do any of this stuff. So I agree with you about things like torrenting, but what we've developed barely is the ability to say, let's check Hulu.
What my friend would say is that if they make it so difficult for you to pay for it in a rational way at a fair, then they're inviting you to kind of rattle their cage and, for example, get the whole season on a floppy drive or on a USB drive in about 3 minutes. But anyway, just
yeah, and they should be advised, because there've been some write-ups which we might want to cover next week, like about what happened with Time Inc. Where have magazines gone? Like, they disappeared. broadcast networks are going to set themselves up for the same kind of thing. If they don't, they have an advantage, which is people still think of those 3 or 4 networks as a certain amount of, must view of something and universally accessible. I understand they can't just be giving it away for free, but they have to navigate a little more clearly and decisively. And I don't know what the hell's going on with that, and nobody told me.
So on to segment 2.
Yep.
One that we probably could really almost have on the show now every week, which is what will Amazon eat next?
Yeah.
It does seem like they found a new thing to eat this morning. They're not, after deciding to take on the grocery business 3 weeks ago and the pharmaceutical drug healthcare business last week, they woke up this morning and said, still hungry after pharma, maybe we'll eat UPS and FedEx.
Yeah. Well, I think that we should divide it into 2 chunks, which one is like, what about that delivery, and then the second one we'll come to is the healthcare one. But I guess what I feel like is, of course, this is inevitable. This is almost a mimicking of AWS, the web server business, where they're serving so much that they might as well just get in that business anyway. It's amazing to me that they kind of beat Google to the punch on that, since Google had a lot more servers doing a lot more things. But I look at it 3 ways. One is Uber talked about doing this because they would have so many cars around that they could deliver delivery services of all sorts. But I believe and feel there's credibility in Amazon's ability to do it. 2, it's just a sign. It reminds me of the SpaceX point. Other companies need to get smart and think about what they can leverage and bring kind of best processes and methods to these things. And you just don't see it enough. And the third, I would say, is if we didn't already have some signs, this is a sign that conglomerates are coming back in a big way, right? Not since the 70s when there were companies like Gulf and Western that we didn't even know what they did, but they own the Knicks and turbines and, whatever, have we started to get into this conglomerate mode, except it's kind of the synergy version, chapter 2.
So I'm going to be a cynic here. I don't think Amazon actually really plans to compete with UPS or FedEx. They have historically a standard mode of negotiating. If you look at when they were buying diapers.com, they were in parallel negotiating the purchase price for diapers.com and building a standalone Amazon branded diapers product. And what they were saying during the price negotiation, which went on for a couple of months, if I remember the book properly, was, look, we want to buy you, but every day that we're replacing one of your customers with one of our customers, your value's going down. So, maybe just do it. Maybe they're,
negotiating ploy.
I think that maybe they're in the middle of just renegotiating their deals with UPS and FedEx. At the end of the day, do they really want to have drivers and trucks? And no, don't get me wrong. Net, I think they'd love to do drone delivery. But
no, that's what I was going to mention. I think drone delivery plus the acquisition of Whole Foods and the inevitability of grocery delivery, these are not freezer trucks and everything else. I do feel like this is, I'm glad you mentioned it because I hadn't thought of it, but I completely agree with you. But I think it's an and. I do think they have the ability to both use it as a point of leverage, and they might pull the trigger on it. But it's a really good point.
I got to say, though, going to one of your biggest when you think about how much of Amazon's strength in the market is that last mile, you order it on your computer and then 3 hours later somehow magically it appears at your door. Like the fact that they're threatening these 2 core providers that they have critical business interests with. I mean, it wouldn't take much for UPS to just go, I think maybe we'll be a couple hours late for a while.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's right. It's notable that there's 2 of them instead of 1 of them. So there's going to be a little play one off against the other. And the second is, this is a page from the Steve Jobs book. This is exactly what he did, both with the record industry and with certain print and broadcast media as he was coming to and reinventing their business for them. But he was also doing a lot of gouging. It's also exactly what Apple what Amazon has done with the book industry, right? I mean, it's sort of simultaneously destroying and leveraging them. And to their credit, the one thing that makes me think Bezos is anything other than Satan is his willingness to lose money over and over to make sure he has the best prices and has great service to customers so that they can actually be credible in saying that they're a customer-centric company.
Sidebar conversation, which we should research and have another day. But for the life of me, I do not understand the relationship between Amazon and the U.S. Postal Service.
Oh well, it's yeah.
I mean,
it's who knows? It's a classic privatize. You've got almost a public trust, but the UPS is competing against FedEx too. So there's a lot going on there, and you're right. And it's a little bit like what you mentioned before with NASA and the government and SpaceX. There's strange things happen. Now I'm getting Amtrak reverberating in the background of my head here.
So let's talk about healthcare. What do we know about Amazon's appetite for healthcare?
Well, I would say three things. This is my new approach. I want to just be snappy and say three things. One is the cost of meds, period. Right? There's no doubt about it that there's leverage, there's competition, there's delivery, there's overstate lines, there's what's happening in the government, and there's these get them from Canada. By the way, there's also another thing which has made delivery be part of this, is that it used to be that you had to get your meds 1 month at a time or whatever, but now you can sort of get a 3 or 6 month supply, and so the dynamics have changed a little. That's one. Two, the cost and management. The issue is elderly, poor, and families. Are these going to be meaningful solutions or new ways to gouge these people? And I would like to think this is more about helping us in a real meaningful way, but we could talk about that forever. And the third I just wanted to mention is personal data and health data. That's a big backdrop that we might get to at another point, but Amazon, I'm sure they smell a data bonanza out of this, and that's at least part of what's going on.
So, if you look at the CVS Aetna, my bad, I can never remember who bought who. CVS bought Aetna or Aetna bought CVS. But, I mean, you're seeing consolidation at this massive pharmacy, local community, big insurance company level anyway. So, there is some irony to the fact that Amazon in 5 years has gone from looking like it was coming in as the spoiler in these markets to somehow looking like it's now all of a sudden becoming the savior, right? I mean,
yeah, I agree. And it's very complex especially with what's going on with healthcare at a political and governmental level. And, I just happen to believe that there's a borderline evil thing going on with pharma and insurance companies that the government has basically just let happen. But one of the things that people don't always realize is that the huge overhang of healthcare costs net in this country is this sort of last 3 months of life issue, whether you're old, young, or whatever. And, things are, it's just very complex and deep, and we might want to bring in an expert at some point to go in more on this.
I'm putting on our editorial schedule for some point down the road. We should do a whole half hour on med tech for sure.
Yeah, or just health generally, because you might as well bring in a bunch of other things because there's robotics and all sorts of other aging population items.
All right, so the last thing. And we're just about out of time, so the timing is good. Got very little coverage, kind of given the number of big scary things that are going on. But Facebook is in fact testing a downvote.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. It's a good one.
I think it's actually a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Well, look, the thing that we could say before coming up with judgments or analytics around it is Facebook doing something greatly influenced by the fake news and by the feeling like this will make people feel like we care about this, even though I know they must think it's meaningful as well. I don't know. What do you think? I got my 3 points ready to go, but I want to hear what you're sort of
So,
beyond a big deal. What's the meaningfulness?
so, you know, I think the first position about social media is, people should be decent. People should do the right thing. And once you realize that, you know, asking people to just be decent and honest doesn't work, then you start to say, all right, now we need better algorithms to understand behavior. And, if you look at Reddit, which is really, well, I mean, if you go back to Dig,
Yep,
so,
sure.
the idea of a community and a kind of a fluctuating up and down vote environment, which then I would argue on the Reddit site got polluted by anonymity so that you could have robots and bots and noise and, you know,
Yeah, ballot box stuffing.
right?
Yeah,
So Facebook has the potential, because of identity and real people, to take up the votes and down votes and really start to get some, I think, powerfully interesting feedback about
I
popularity.
right. But what I think a few things about this. I do feel like, well, first of all, one thing I want to dispense with is the issue that it might be kind of a form of censorship, because that's just bullshit. I mean, I don't see a way in which that really matters. I mean, it would matter if there was a then to this if, which is to say, oh, once you get X number of downvotes, we pull it or something. But that's not what's going on. I think they're also misreading the situation, possibly. An upvoting and the Reddit and everything else, that something being hot or cold is what those things were more about, not unless it was something like Upworthy, positive, negative. So I think they have to be careful not to sort of mush those two things together, and maybe they're not. But it leads me to the second point, which is what's going on with those expressions. That feels like it's fallen with a dull thud, right? Like, it's like I can hardly ever understand how to access whether I want to put a smiley face, a sad face, whatever. They kind of like took and just turned it into this thing that they wanted to parse out with more nuance. But I just don't understand what this has to do with that, and if they're not just refiring on that. And the third is, it kind of annoys me that they're lost in the world of buzz rather than trying to introduce something with a little utility for us. Like help us manage our lives a little better. Like, you have such ability to really help it, because ultimately Facebook has become the 21st century phone book. But like, maybe that's a second thing to talk about at another point. It's off topic, but it annoys me that they're doubling down on stuff in a very narrow channel that it feels like is a response to criticism.
So they made these changes in the algorithm a week ago, and my news feed has changed dramatically.
Yep.
It's much more chatty. It's much more dogs and babies and people on vacation. It's much less news. And because I am a compulsive news consumer, find myself now off of Facebook more, going to Huffington Post, going to the New York Times, going to the Washington Post, going to Fox News, going to Breitbart, looking for points of view. And I think net, that's a big win for publishers.
Yeah, and I just think Facebook's missing the point too. They're putting like a Band-Aid on the wrong finger or something like that. It's people like to share. It shouldn't be about removing the ability to share news or articles or share things from the internet. That's what the internet is. The other stuff's okay too. But, to me, that plus the other change that they more subtly made in the algorithm a year or two ago, where, you see a limited number of people's posts based on whatever the algorithm is of popularity, or this guess of who you want to see, versus just like, I always switch it to most recent because I just want to see all the people I'm friends with. I'll unfriend them if I don't want to see them. But they're all related, so it's hard to know.
And with that, ding, 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 we are out of time. The future will have to wait till next week.
Thanks, Steve. This is fun.
See ya.